Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Honest HR Nitrous on this beautiful Friday the 13th. This is the live stream I do a couple of times a week where I answer questions. So if you are seeing this and you are a subscriber to my channel and have been so for any amount of time, you should be able to see a chat box. Get in the chat box, and we're here to talk about anything about job search, careers, interviews, resumes, networking, that kind of stuff, employment. The whole shebang-a-bang. It's all good. Anything you've been wondering about, anything you've been struggling with, that's what we're here to do. And to address. This is episode number 137. The title of this episode is called Why Job Interviews Are a Series of Mind-Numbing Contradictions. So we're going to get into that while we're waiting for questions. And once again, I'm going to do some stuff with my good buddy ChatGPT so that you guys can see that a lot of this stuff is not coming from me. It's not just my opinion. This is kind of what's out there. So we're going to be using that. We're going to be talking about it, reacting to it. ChatGPT is useful. It's not the be-all, end-all, but it's certainly useful. It gets a lot of things right, not everything. So let's start this off while we're waiting for the questions to roll on in. And I'm going to use the audio interface here. Okay, so with regard to job search and job interviews, why are job interviews a series of mind-numbing contradictions? Let's start with that. There are so many of these, and for people that have been to job interviews, you guys know exactly what we're talking about here. Okay, be authentic, but also say the right thing. Yeah, you gotta love that. Everybody wants honesty, right? Everybody wants honesty right up to the point where you have to make a good first impression, and then you rethink a lot of honesty, right? That's how these things usually go. So, it's beautiful. You're told, be yourself, be genuine, be authentic. Like good life advice. But unfortunately, in a job interview, that's probably not going to be the best policy. And what that means is talking off the top of your head in a job interview is usually a bad thing because you end up eliminating yourself because you have indicated something about yourself that unbeknownst to you, they don't really like or they're not looking for. And so that's how these things go. They would love you to talk off the top of your head and just go off script and give something authentic and honest. Unfortunately, do you get rewarded for it? A lot of the times you don't. So that's how these things go. So we have people in the chat. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. Olive says hi. So hi, Olive. Thank you for being here. Fentahun. I'm sure I'm not saying that right, but that's never stopped me before in the past. Says, I have an interview and a group discussion in the position of the cabin crew. What do you recommend me? Well, it depends what cabin crew we're talking about. Is this like an airline thing, or this is a cruise ship thing, or it depends. I don't know specifically about that. I wouldn't presume to know all the ins and outs of what people need in those types of industries. I have had some experience with the aviation industry, but if you really want to know, go talk to people that have been on cabin crews. And you know how you do that? If you don't know anyone personally, okay, which hopefully you do, but if you don't, get onto LinkedIn, do a people search in your own city or your own location, and do a search for cabin crew and see who pops up. And then look at those people, look at their background, look at their experience, look at their qualifications, and you can then reach out to them if you wish and ask them questions like this, and they could give you very specific, industry-specific information from your location that will help you, okay? But generally being agreeable, some of the blanket advice is just to be agreeable, be pleasant, like learn how to, this sounds so stupid, but it's true. Where they say smile, it's true. Because if you go around looking at people like this, that makes them not want to interact with you, not want to be around you. Whereas if you try and look like remotely pleasant, like I'm trying to do now, Do you call this a smile? I don't know. It's kind of a grin. You're just trying to look agreeable and pleasant and approachable. That accomplishes a hell of a lot. People actually want to talk to you, want to be around you, and they find interacting with you much more pleasant when you look agreeable and approachable. So it's such a stupid thing. It's such a small thing, but it's very important. You start with that, okay? Mel says, hi, you touched on management, and I just missed your last, but I watched it while I waited for this. How do I answer that I'm ready to move on from supervisory role to management paperwork, so to speak? Okay, well, that kind of depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking to a recruiter in a job interview, recruiters are not in management. They don't know. So they don't know what's good and what's bad. They might know in the sense that they might have read it off a paper or in a book or something, but generally they won't know. They'll have their own opinions about what managers do. If you are honestly going up for a management role, the real decision maker is going to be some kind of manager, right? They are not going to leave it to a recruiter to make a judgment call on who's the best manager. You know what I'm saying? So the person you want to talk to, okay, is going to be another manager, presumably the boss of the manager role that you're applying for, okay? Now, what would be preferable is if you reached out to that organization and you did this outside of the whole like hiring process so that they see you in a more authentic light and not seeing you as a candidate that's saying anything they got to say to look good because they want to be in this job, right? So, but once again, people skills are very good. Communication skills are very good. Interpersonal skills, all that stuff. So being agreeable, being friendly, being sensitive to other people, they like that. You know, for example, if you have a conversation with somebody, especially if you're meeting them for the first time, do you say hi and then talk all about yourself for like half an hour? No, you don't. You say, hi, it's great to meet you. And then you act like you genuinely are happy to meet them. And then you ask them about them. That's usually what endears people to people, right? It's like getting, like I've said before, it's like getting a spam email. You know, what makes it a spam email? Well, it's a person you don't know, right? And then what do? They talk to you all about themselves, right? Here's what we do. Here's why it's great. Here's what you should do. You know, you should buy it, right? What's the reaction most people have? Delete, block, you know what I mean? So you would want to do the opposite of that, essentially, right? You go up to somebody, you make them feel like you genuinely care about talking to them, and then you ask them about them. What do you think of this? That kind of stuff. And if you ask them about something they genuinely want to talk about, they have opinions on things, they know about what they do, they believe what they do is important, and they got a lot of knowledge and opinions on it, you ask them about that. Number one, it's a great way to learn. Number two, it endears you to them, So if you're wanting to convince somebody that you have people skills, you could be a great boss, that's a big component of it, right? Making people want, you to be around. That's important. But then again, this varies. If you're getting a supervisory role at some bad organization, they may deludedly think that, supervisors are more effective when they're harsh, when they're stern, and they divvy out punishments and they don't have any, qualms about punishing people. If that's what they're going for, then that's what they're going for. But does that make sense? Okay. How do I answer if I'm ready to move on from supervisor role to management paperwork, so to speak? It also helps understanding what the role of business is, what business is all about and what management is all about. It's about accomplishing goals, right? So if you're genuinely in a management position, you're responsible for a thing, whether that's a team or, a property or a project or an asset or money, like a fund. And the idea is that, you're compensated if you meet certain goals, right? And if you don't meet those goals, that's bad. You take responsibility for it, meaning that if you don't achieve the goals, then you're probably going to not come out on top. You're either going to be fired or you're going to be losing compensation, right? There's going to be some detriment. So business knowledge is good. People skills are good. And if you could meet the person in a networking type context as opposed to meeting them for the first time in a job interview, that really helps. Hopefully that makes sense. Johnny says, got a new job and I start March 3rd. Thank you so much for doing these videos and streams. The information is invaluable. Well, that's great to hear. Congratulations, Johnny. That's great news. And it comes on a Friday too. So way to go. I hope you enjoy your new position, and I hope it turns out that it's everything you hoped it would be. Way to go. And thank you for telling me. Olive says, I'm a woman preparing for government job. Have a lot of past failures and year gap in my resume. I know it is the first thing I will be targeted in an interview. How do I deal with this trauma? Okay, I'm a woman preparing for government job. I have a lot of past failures and a year gap in my resume. I know it is the first thing I'll be targeted. Okay, well, if you're talking specifically about the year gap, is that a current year gap? That means like it's been a year since your last employment. Is that what you mean? Or is it like a previous gap? If it's a previous gap, they shouldn't really care too much. If it's a current gap, the fact that they invited you to an interview indicates it's not a deal breaker, right? Because if it was a deal breaker, they wouldn't waste their time talking to you, right? So what you want to do, generally speaking, for a work gap is you want to make it appear that, there's nothing wrong with you, because the reason why that triggers an investigation on their part, they're curious, is because it's viewed as a red flag. And the mechanism is that they think if you've been out of work, maybe we don't really know why, right? Oh, sure, we can ask you and you can give an explanation, but do we really know that that's the real reason? No, we don't. So there's a question there. And the idea is that maybe if nobody wants to hire you, they're worried that, well, maybe there's something wrong with you. There's a reason for that that's valid. So it puts you up into this higher risk category, right? That's the conventional wisdom. Obviously, there's a lot of exceptions to that, but that's basically why that can become an issue, right? And why they want to know about it. So the way to address it is, to basically give some explanation that suggests that it's not that, no one will hire you. It's that you're out of work for another reason. Either you've gone back to school, or I suppose you could say I'm taking care of a sick family member, but that has its own issues. The concern there is that if you're off taking care of a sick family member, what's the guarantee that that's not going to occur if they hire you? They hire you and then you're off again because the family member needs help, So that's what they want to avoid. So if you say I went back to school, I brushed up on my skills. Now that they're up to date, I'm rejoining the workforce. That's kind of a benign excuse for it that waves away any obvious red flags. Now, the problem is that if you haven't gone back to school, that's a lie. So what I would recommend is actually this. Go right now and, just take a couple of free online classes, just a couple of days, right? And then you can say, in all honesty, look, I have gone back to school. I have brushed up on my skills. I've taken courses in this, AI, whatever. And, now that I've sort of updated my skill set, I'm ready to rejoin the workforce, and that's why I'm here. Okay, so you can try that. That usually is one way to handle it. Sometimes they will accept that, sometimes they won't, but the fact that they're talking to you suggests that it's not a deal breaker. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. Someone says, Fist says, hey Bill, that moved on me. I just landed a new job by using some of your advice, so thank you for that. Well, great. That's great to hear. Fisk, congratulations. And I'm glad things are working out for you. Mel says, yeah, it makes sense. Thank you. Okay. Awesome. That was for the management thing. Marius says, what are the main differences between presenting yourself to a recruiter and to management? Okay, well, here's the deal. There are two different skill sets. That's like saying, what's the difference between presenting yourself to a plumber and to a lawyer? They're coming from two different worlds, right? The HR department, like the people in the HR department that work in recruitment and selection, they're HR employees. That means they go to school to learn about employment standards and labor laws and things like this, how to fill in forms to tell the government that you've hired somebody and, all this kind of stuff. That's what they're trained in. Okay. What that means is that if they posted a job for like a plumber, they themselves know nothing about plumbing. They know about HR. Okay. Like how you, deal with, being off on disability and things like this, like HR type things. That's what they're schooled in. If you're talking to management usually is like the management that hires plumbers. Usually it's a jumped up plumber. They run a plumbing operation. So they manage a bunch of plumbers, go out and coordinate them going off and doing plumbing jobs and getting paid for it. So it's the difference between talking to a HR employee as opposed to a plumber. You know what I'm saying? So if you're a plumber and you're talking to management, chances are they will understand the nature of your job a hell of a lot more than the recruiter will. One day the recruiter is charged to recruit a plumber. The next day they're posting a job for a paralegal. And the day after that, they're posting a job for an ambulance repair technician, right? So the recruiter will know general things. Like, for example, they will be able to tell if you have a bad attitude in the job interview. They'll be able to tell if you're asking for more money than what this job pays. And they will be able to tell if your story doesn't make sense, you can't explain some of the experience you've put on your resume, right? You don't need to be a plumber to tell those things, right? But management, they will probably be able to ask you questions like, what tools do you use? And do you work with this hydraulic tools, or do you work with electric tools or pneumatic tools? What's your preference? Do you have any experience using pneumatic tools that we use here or something like that? They'll have more of the technical side, right? So that's the difference between talking to those two parties. Does that make sense? They're coming at this from two different worlds. Okay, sorry, my feed keeps like jumping around here. So that was for Marius, a recruiter, and to management. So that's the general difference between those two. Fist says, also, I applied through LinkedIn post to jobs, so I went through multiple rounds of interviews. External recruiter, then internal, then HR, then hiring manager. Good God, that sounds exhausting. And finally, the boss of the hiring manager. And then the boss's brother, and then the boss's brother's cousin's dog, and then the dog's fleas. They were all in the room. Yeah, that sounds exhausting. My heart goes out to you. That sounds like you're in bureaucratic HR hell. But I'm glad it turned out. Well. I would advise against going through this exhausting hiring process and rather focus on the hidden job market. Yes. If they rejected me, then I would try hidden job market for sure. That is brilliant advice. Yeah, well, that's where the majority of the jobs are, right? And the vast majority of the good jobs are in the hidden job market. So that's where people should be focusing their efforts. The other problem, of course, is that you've got something like 80% of the applicants looking in the posted job market. So the posted job market contains about 15-20% of the jobs, somewhere in there. But you've got 80% of the applicants looking there. So it's oversaturated. It's very competitive. That's why you get hundreds and hundreds of candidates applying to every job. That's one of the reasons, is because people are focusing there. You look on the hidden job market, and you're up against one or two other people usually, so you got to love those odds. ABM says, many times managers want certain types work to prioritize without verbal expression. I know those are critical for climbing the ladder, but how to identify those? I'm having a problem with the grammar here. Many times managers want certain types work to prioritize without verbal expression. Sorry, you lost me there, ABM. If you could maybe break that up into smaller sentences, we could try again. Mel says, I had good interviews with recruiters and hiring managers, and they mentioned a potential second or third interview, but then they decide to go with someone else. How can I ensure another interview? Listen. These people, as much as it's hard to believe sometimes, they're human, and they want to minimize awkward conversations with people. They also want to minimize people potentially getting visibly upset with them, right? So the nature of their job, and I'm not making excuses for them, but the nature of their job is that if 600 people apply for a job, they've got to say no to essentially 599 of them, right? So they got to say no a lot. And so what they do is they try indirect ways of saying no. They usually won't say it right to your face. When you're in front of them, it'll all be peaches and cream. It'll all be like, wow, great, thank you for coming in, like, we will be in touch. This was really encouraging, But then you get back home and then you get an email that says, nope, sorry, we've decided to move on. Right? That's just the nature of how this stuff goes, unfortunately, when there's humans in the process. As we're moving to possibly more AI and stuff being in the process, get ready for some really blunt communication, I'm sure. Listen, you got to think of this as a numbers game, okay? Because that's what it is. Essentially, job search is the sales process. You're selling yourself. Now, if you're an introvert and you're not a salesperson, you're probably in living hell hearing that. But listen, it's actually a lot easier than it sounds, okay? All you have to do to sell yourself is just explain, what you know, what you've done, and what you can do, right? It's really not rocket science. That's all you have to do. Now, the reality of posted jobs is that for every one opening, they're talking to 5 to 10 people, right? They're doing interviews with about 5 to 10 people. So statistically, the odds are that you have a 10 to 20% chance of being offered a job if you go to an interview, okay? So that's 80 to 90% chance that you're not going to get it. But the idea is that you do multiple interviews for multiple jobs, and sooner or later, you're going to get it. It's like rolling a 6 with a dice, right? With a die, right? Are you going to get it on the first throw? Probably not. But if you keep rolling the dice, you're going to get a 6 pretty soon. It's a numbers game, and it depends more on random chance than anything you have control over. It really does. Oh, sure, it makes sense to work on yourself, learn how to interview, try to be charismatic and stuff. But really, the even bigger factor is just random chance, because you have no idea what these people are looking for. And some people are looking for some pretty weird stuff. Sometimes they're looking for someone they can easily exploit. You know what I mean? And sorry, that's not you. We're going with someone else. You looked like you're kind of savvy to some of this stuff. You probably push back, So we're going with somebody totally clueless, not you, right? You have no idea what they're looking for. Don't worry about it. Just do your best and focus on getting as many opportunities as possible, as many leads as possible, as many interviews as possible. And if you're looking in the posted job market, that's how you win, okay? If you're getting tired of that process, learn about the hidden job market. That's where over 80% of the jobs are. It's a completely different process. You don't deal with recruiters. Okay, you're not dealing with recruiters at all. They don't have any real part of the hidden job market. It's all managers, right? Hiring managers. Okay, so that's how these things kind of work. Okay, sorry, the feed moved again on me. I'm sorry. Okay, now that was, so we did Fist, ABM, Mel. Mel says, is that like Simon says? They mentioned a potential third interview, but then they decide to go with somebody else. Yeah, they always say pleasant stuff to your face. They always want it to be as pleasant as possible. That's why, unfortunately, we have a culture of people just absolutely lying through their teeth, like to a ridiculous degree. Usually, if you learn a bit about diplomacy is like getting along terribly well with other people, even though you may not agree on everything. Like that's what kind of diplomacy is. So it's very polite, very pleasant. The problem is that when you're like totally misrepresenting yourself, and I'm talking about the recruiters here, like saying, oh yeah, we'll totally be in touch, and stuff, and they have no intention. Traditionally you wouldn't do that, right? But today we've clearly moved into that area, So just be prepared for these people to lie through their teeth. Nothing is certain until you get an offer in writing. Even then, it's not like absolutely guaranteed, but it's a big milestone just to get it signed in writing. You know what I mean? Anything before that doesn't matter. What people say doesn't matter. You just do your best. If they want to talk to you, you go down and talk to them, right? And then you move on. That's the best way to handle it. Hello to Detroit Become Mutant. I recognize that name. How could anyone forget? Randolph says, for some watching, hit the like button. Let's reward him for giving good advice. Oh, thank you, Randolph. That's very, very kind of you. Detroit says, I had an interview today and they want me to come in again next week and demonstrate my skills. Is this a good sign? Well, it's not a bad sign. As opposed to saying we never want to see you again. Yeah, it's a good sign. Does it mean that like this is practically in the bag? No. You don't know what's going on there, and you will never know. And you shouldn't go insane trying to figure it out. You will never know what is in their head, what their thought processes are. They're certainly not going to be honest with you. And they're going to do everything they can to obfuscate what's really happening on their end. So all you have to worry is if these people want to talk to you and there's potentially a good job at the end of it, go talk to them and then come back and then forget about it. Try and focus on generating more opportunities, more leads, more interviews. Olive says, yes, thank you. So in India, we first write exams on pen and paper mode for government administrative jobs. Then on the basis of scores, we get an interview call. Aggregate marks decide selection. Okay. Weightage of written to interview is 5-1. Okay. Pop-Tart says, how to exploit hidden job market. Like in doing investment advising. Just look up firms near me. Most I look up say they are not hiring. Just keep asking around. Well, okay. Here's what you do. Okay. In the description box under this live stream, there's a couple of links to some videos on my channel. There's one called How Successful People Get Jobs. Okay. Check out that video. That'll give you an idea of one way you can tap the hidden job market. Okay. It's not about, not that we're going to argue about wording, but it's not exploiting it. It's tapping it. You know what I mean? You're not trying to pull a fast one on people, I hope. You're trying to connect with people that are looking for something that you have. They have a legitimate need. You have some legitimate skills. It works out, like that's what it's about. Okay, so go check out that video. That's probably the best thing you can do to help you understand kind of what it is and the general idea. Mel says, LOL, yeah, it's easier to read along with my comment question. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at a feed, and you know how feeds, they'll kind of go like that? This one just goes, like it just instantly shifts, and by one or two positions. So like I'm reading something and all of a sudden it changes, and then I'm reading somebody else's comment. So it's quite jarring, actually. Mel says, I didn't think about that going into the interview. I just answered honestly. Maybe more interviews will help me wise up to what they really want. Now Mel was, oh yeah, the whole like second or third interview thing. Yeah. Yeah, listen, like, you know, this is how they operate. It's kind of unfortunate because I think that young people that are coming out of school, they were never told any of this. So you're not expecting it. Once you're expecting it, and once you understand like who they are and what their perspective is and what they care about and what they don't care about, you know, and what their job is, then it starts to fall into place. You know what I mean? Pop-Tart says, thank you, I will watch, then come back. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the hinge job market, it's people talking to other people. There is no authority that gatekeeps it or governs it. It's like you have the right to reach out and speak to anyone you want, you know? That's what it is. And a lot of jobs, the vast majority of jobs are not posted publicly. So you find out about them by talking to people. You know, there's many ways to talk to people. There's many different channels you could go over. There's many different things you could say. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a couple of common things, right? So that's what I've tried to explain to people. Fist says, I'm curious about your opinion on HR people in the office. In my previous jobs, it seems like the main task of HR was to monitor and spy on employees and report to everything to management. Also, there were like worker HRs, so they monitored us workers. Middle management HRs that monitored middle management, and then top management HR. Yeah, that sounds like a real fun organization to be in. Listen, the HR department, it deals with employees. That's what it does. Anything to do with employees? Go see HR. That's what HR is. Just like the sales department deals with customers, HR exists to deal with employees, right? That's the idea. And within HR, there's different functions, right? So one function that we talk about here, obviously, is recruitment and selection. That's when you try and find new employees, right? But yes, there's other functions of HR because they're dealing with every aspect of the employees in a company or in an organization. So enforcing HR policies, like enforcing the rules, that's the HR department, right? Monitoring potentially illegal activity, monitoring people breaking the rules, maybe, doing things they shouldn't be doing. That's HR. We're, dealing with people that don't perform. They don't do their job very well. That's HR, right? So they have people that specialize in all of those things, right? That's their role. So yes, they would have all of that stuff would fall under the umbrella of HR. Now, depending on where you work, I mean, some organizations take this kind of stuff really far. Other ones really don't. You know what I mean? It depends on the culture of the company. Culture just means like the way they do things there. That's all. And depending on who's running it and what they believe and what their opinions are, they build an organization in their image. That embodies how they feel people should be managed. Right? There's many different conflicting opinions on that. Right? So yes. So what you're describing sounds like a very large organization, because large organizations, they generally believe that employees are not to be trusted. They believe that employees will do as little as possible up to the point of not being fired. So they'll do just a little bit more than the minimum that would get them fired, right? And they treat their employees as such with that assumption, right? So that's why they spy on them. That's why they quote the rules to you. That's why they give you warnings, all that kind of like negative reinforcement and punishment, right? In some smaller organizations, they have the opposite attitude. They believe that, we want to inspire people. We want them to care about working here. We're not big enough that we have enough people to stand over your shoulder and watch you do every aspect of your job. We require that you go out and do your job and nobody's watching you. So we have to trust you. And in order to trust you, we have to believe that you care about working here. And in order to do that, they do things like they give you incentives to care. They say, look, if the company makes money, we're going to take some of that money and give it to you, right? So if you help us make money and achieve our goals, you will be rewarded. You will find that it can be very rewarding working here. And if you have any ideas or you have any suggestions of helping us do what we do better, you will be rewarded for that. So that's a completely different way of looking at your employees, right? This is all well known. They teach all this stuff in business school, So there's different ways of doing it. But yeah, so what you're describing is like large organization culture where they believe in not empowering employees because they don't trust employees. That's one of the reasons why they did the return to office thing, or where they got everyone to come back to the office. They don't want people working remotely, even though that's more efficient in many ways. It's because they can't keep tabs on you as easily, right? And they have this belief that if you're not being monitored, you're going to be goofing off, right? And that's not a stupid belief if you pay somebody the same amount of money no matter what they do. It's not unfounded. And you always get workers that ruin it for everyone else by doing this. They do slack off, they do take advantage. And that's why, I don't really want to defend these people, but that's why it reinforces those patterns, right? Randolph says HR works for the company. They don't work for the employers. Yeah, of course. That's the thing that surprises people. Who signs the checks of the HR employees? The company, just as they sign yours, So yeah, they work for the company. They're told you have to go and do this and report back to us because we're your bosses. So they do it, But yeah, I guess where the maybe some deceit is that they try and give the workforce this propaganda that you can come to us if you have a concern and if you have a question, we're your friend and we're here to help you and this kind of stuff. And so people can let down their guard, maybe say something they shouldn't. You don't realize you're talking to an agent of the management, of the management of the company, right? Maybe you might not want to disclose that. It might not be good for you. Fist says, who would do such a job and for what compensation? Okay, so this is like what they're doing. Yeah, like another part of recruitment and selection is things like succession management and stuff like that, where the idea is that, they want people cross-trained. They don't want any employee to have unique knowledge and abilities that if that person leaves, it screws the company. They don't want that. They want people to be cross-trained in everything. So everybody's, replaceable, right? If somebody leaves, oh well, we still, we have somebody else that can immediately do that person's job, right? So that's one of the things that they're doing. If somebody is looking to maybe leave, we have one or two other people that can easily move into their position and pick up where they left off, right? That kind of failover. So that's another thing that they do. Marius says, talking too much as a candidate can be risky and annoying, yet when I'm the one applying, I tend to overtalk. What do you think? Well, Marius, it really boils down to experience, which is usually based on practice, right? If you're older and you've been to many job interviews in your lifetime, you kind of tend to get better at it, and you tend to feel more comfortable with it. But It's also why people practice. So if you're going to interviews and you want to work on your interviewing ability, the first thing I would say is practice with somebody else. Get like a friend or family member to do mock interviews with you. You know, like what I recommend, and I've said this many times before on this channel, if you get like a friend or family member to do like, say 3 or 4 mock interviews with you a day, right? You could maybe even use more than one friend or family member, but do 3 or 4 a day. After 10 days, like, you know, Monday to Friday for 2 weeks, you'll have done 30 to 40 mock interviews. You will probably know your stuff. You will know all the questions backwards and forwards. You'll have been in like situations where, you know, you don't know the answer, so you do like a failover response. So you're not just stumped. And you start to feel more at ease. It starts to feel less awkward. You know, you're more in control, and, you know, you understand what's going on. You've been through it many times, so you feel more confident. So that's the first thing I would say. Now, if you have real concerns over your ability to do a job interview, like you think you might be doing something wrong, but you don't know what it is, the way to fix that is to get a career coach. Okay? I'm not a career coach. I'm not talking about me. There are a lot of career coaches out there. For what it's worth, I do a collaboration every 2 weeks with another YouTuber. She's a career coach. For what it's worth, her YouTube channel is Life Work Balance. So you could check that out. Even just do one session, like just 1 hour with a career coach. They'll do a mock interview with you, usually. And then they'll give you feedback. They'll say, here's like my professional opinion as a recruiter. Here's what you're doing well. Here's what you're doing not so well. And here's what I recommend you do to work on it. So that can give you an objective opinion. Excuse me. That was harsh. So some of that stuff might help you, hopefully. Mark sent a super chat. Says, hey, Bill, thank you for your videos. Very useful. Thank you, Mark. That's awesome. Way to go. I appreciate your support, and I appreciate your presence here. And if you have any questions, feel free, you know. Mel says, I'm used to getting jobs based on word of mouth, so going through posted jobs is new to me. Also, I followed GPT and was honest about being fired for attendance, so I have to rethink how I interview. Yeah, you see, what they try and do in job interviews is they try and get you to spill the dirt on yourself. You know, like they want to know everything bad that you do or that you've ever done. And so they probe and they try and uncover that, peel back the layers, right? And your job is to kind of counter that, right? You know, so you want to avoid saying bad things about yourself. And if you have no choice, because they ask you directly or something, you know, you minimize it. You just minimize it, and then you give them counter reasons why you're great. You know, so you want to give them all kinds of reasons why you're awesome, and really minimize anything you say that might not indicate you're awesome. You know what I mean? We're talking about first impressions here. It's about a first impression. And if you don't know someone, they just walk into the room, but the first thing out of their mouth is how they don't like this, you know, or they've never done that. It's like, if you had to give an opinion on them right at that moment, what would your opinion be? It'd probably be very bad, right? But it's based on like such little data that it's probably completely inaccurate, right? But nevertheless, that's what they're going to try and do. They're going to try and probe all kinds of potential problem areas and see what they find, what they uncover, you know? That's what job interviews are about. And so it really helps if you know what they're going to ask and you know why they're asking it, to see if you'll admit this or disclose that. And then knowing like, okay, how can I phrase it or wriggle out of that, you know, because I'm a good employee, but I don't want to give the impression that I'm a bad employee by saying this thing. So how can I phrase it? That's what a lot of job interviews, unfortunately, are about. Fist says, I remember one day I had stomach issues, so I went to the toilet often, but my manager wasn't there at work. However, the day after, he knew all about it and told me to try to be a bit more cautious. This was with regard to the HR business, like they're spying on people. That's just plain weird. If they're like keeping track of like when you take bathroom breaks and stuff like that, I get it for certain jobs, but that's bordering on weird, Look, if I was in a situation similar to that, the first thing I would do is try and like say like, look, it's not a rule, it's an exception. I'm just sick, or I've had some stomach issues. It's like, or whatever, whatever the issue is. And, so guilty as charged, but it's just a one-time only thing, and it's not going to affect my work going forward, Fist says, he told me that the HR didn't think I was doing a good job, even though he was very satisfied. Like, why do you care how often I go to the bathroom? If I'm doing a good job, crazy. Yeah. You see, you never know what's going on behind the scenes, because maybe your boss thinks you're a good employee. But then again, your boss can't just tell the HR, people that brought this up to go piss off. They have to respond to it, and they can't just wave it away. They have to show that they're looking into it. They've made sure that this isn't a problem, and they have addressed it. So even though your boss might be on your side, it's their job to pursue these things, right? And that's not up to them. They're told this by higher ups. That's what their job involves, right? When a issue comes in, these people are going to alert you to it. You have to take care of it, right? So in order to do their job, they would have to talk to you about it, address it, and then get a satisfactory explanation to say that they've addressed it properly, right? So you sometimes have to play along. You can't just tell your boss like, well, what do you care? If I'm a good employee, why should you care? It's like, yeah, they're on your side, but you have to help them do their job too, right? So you never really know what's going on the back end. Fist says, so HR is just an individual who doesn't have any useful skill, but they are there because big organizations don't have time to deal with employees and hiring since they do business and count money. No, that's not accurate. That's a laundry list of disdain you've got going there. They have a function. Now, obviously it depends on how you do this function. Maybe there are some unethical organizations out there run by jackasses and psychopaths. I've had the pleasure of being inside a couple of those, but the thing is, it's not necessarily the HR employee's fault, like they're doing a thing. If you make rules but never ever monitor people to see if they're following them, that's obviously not a good thing, especially if some of the rules are there to ensure other people's safety or to ensure that you're not stealing from the company, et cetera, et cetera. Like there's good reasons to enforce the rules, right? So if they never ever pay attention to it, or worse, they do pay attention to it, they see someone breaking the rules, but then they do nothing. What does that say to the other employees that are following the rules? You're just telling them like, oh, well, you could actually break all the rules and we don't care. So anyway, this gets into a whole other discussion, but the point is, it's not inherently bad. It's not some kind of conspiracy. They're there to do a job. Some companies go nuts with this stuff, in which case it's just stupid. I'll be the first to admit that. You shouldn't have to do much of this, but it's not that HR is useless and it's not a big conspiracy to keep everybody down. That's not what it is. Like anything else, it can be abused. Maybe they're abusing it in this organization where you work. I'm not sure. If they're monitoring bathroom breaks and raising red flags, even though your boss thinks you're a good employee, I'd say that's ground for abusing it. Randolph says, on some level, it sounds like these interviews are looking for reasons to disqualify the interview. Yes. Well, think of it this way. They got one vacancy, one opening, one position, and they've had a couple hundred people apply. They interview about 5 to 10 people, somewhere in there. They've got to, if they're interviewing 6 people, they've got to eliminate 5. If they're interviewing 10 people, they got to eliminate 9. Right? They're going to take the best of the bunch. So, yes, they are there to try and pare it down, like whittle it down to one finalist that they select. That's unfortunately the nature of how it goes. One way to fix that is give them as little additional information while answering the question. Yeah, well, you can definitely overshare in job interviews. That, like we were talking about that earlier, about like talking off the top of your head is a bad thing in a job interview. That's why when you do preparation, one of the things you're going to do is you're going to vet your answer. You're going to make sure it's appropriate for you to say in an interview. Then when you, presumably you rehearse a little bit, you anticipate the questions they are likely to ask. You have an answer prepared, right? So that when you go to the interview and they do ask that, you remember what to say in the moment. You don't go blank, like your mind doesn't go blank because you got people staring at you and you're nervous. And then what you do say is something that you've vetted, it's crafted, you've prepared for it, right? So it doesn't get you eliminated. It allows you to pass, right? You're not going to be able to anticipate everything. That's an impossible goal, to anticipate everything, but the vast majority of it, you can. And for the rest of it, you can sort of prepare some default answers, things you fall back on, right? So for example, one of those is to talk about how you meet, or at least can speak to, the requirements. So if they ask you a question that's just totally incomprehensible, you really don't know what the answer is, you don't even understand the question fully, it doesn't really make any sense, you can kind of just tie that into how you meet things. Like for example, let's say I've got an engineering degree and I'm up for the job of an engineer or something, and they ask me some totally off the wall, convoluted question. They say something like, what people skills do you think you have that will enable you to resolve conflicts between yourself and others in an environment of creativity and inclusivity? Go. And I'm thinking, what the hell does that mean? I can fall back and say, like, well, listen, in any environment, okay, good interpersonal communication is key. You have to start off any interaction you have with anyone else with respect and protocol. That's why I always use good manners. That's why I always ensure that, I'm not talking down to anyone, but I'm making sure that I'm addressing people's concerns, and they feel that they can talk to me and they can bring up concerns that they might have, and I will address them respectfully. Something like that. Like, I'm falling back on, communication skills, right? So that's one thing you can fall back on. Like, there's certain sort of standard things. And then you say, okay, you do mock interviews with a friend or family member or with a career coach, and they're going to throw these kind of curveballs at you. And it's kind of an exercise in defaulting. So if you've got like 3 or 4 kind of default things you can say, that helps. Right? And then it's hard to stump you when they do an interview with you. Now the feed has been going forward, it's been going back. So I don't know if people are deleting their own comments or something. These interviews are for reasons to disqualify. Okay, we talked about that. Pop-Tart says, I found a firm half a mile away. They aren't explicitly hiring for my role, but I should personally email the president or use the contact us page on their website. It's a very small firm, by the way. Okay. Yep. I mean, fair enough. There's like, I would actually recommend different things, but whatever. That's not the stupidest thing I've ever heard. First of all, the goal should be to find not just one firm, but many, many firms. That's the first thing. Secondly, it's not about like, well, depending on what you're doing, but the easiest techniques to probe the hidden job market are things like direct outreach, things like informational interviews. Those are things that you're like peppering a lot of targets with. Just like applying to jobs. You don't just apply for one job. If you're doing a job search campaign and you're applying for jobs, you apply to many, many jobs. And the idea is that like most of them will go nowhere, but one or two of them, will turn into interviews and maybe, an offer, right? So the hidden job market is kind of the same thing. It's, the goal is to not just find one target, but to find many, many targets. And then, either you're doing the most basic thing, which is like a sort of template message, right? Or you're micromanaging it a bit more. You're maybe pushing for like an informational interview or something like that. Both of those can open all kinds of doors, by the way. So yeah. Fist says, if I was the owner of the big organization, I would definitely hire an HR to keep an eye on employees and enforce rules so I have full information. Employees hate HR and not me. Okay, that's one way to look at it. I mean, the reality is that like this is the reality that like a lot, I'm probably going to be very unpopular for saying this. The reality is that you are requesting to partner with this organization. That's what you do when you get a job. You're not a slave. You're not oppressed. This is voluntary on your part. You're saying, look, I think we could work together. You seem to need this, and I believe, I can supply that. If that works for you, that works for me. Let's do this. And next thing you know, you're an employee. Right? Now, that's the reality. A lot of people realize this. They recognize it for what it is. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of people that don't seem to understand that. They think that, this is not a partnership that I've entered into voluntarily. This is something else. This is something where, you have power over me and like I'm now imagining that you have all kinds of obligations towards me that are not in writing, that, we never agreed to. I'm expecting you to behave a certain way to me and, not do this and not do that. You know what I mean? Like, that's the reality. It's called a psychological contract where you imagine that there's an agreement, but there isn't actually an agreement there. The other person or the other party didn't say, I promise I won't do this, and I agree to that, right? You know what I mean? So, but the flip side of this is that because it's a voluntary agreement and a voluntary arrangement on your part, you're not a slave to these people. You can go and do whatever the hell you want. You can go, you can quit, you can go and work for somebody else. Like you know what I mean? Like you have the power over yourself. You don't have to accept any of this crap. If you're working for an organization that's treating you like crap, leave. Find something else. Learn about how to get something better and then get something better, For a lot of people, that will just learn to be an employee somewhere else. Or, you could do like what I talk about once a week, which is entrepreneurship. You could start a side hustle that brings another income stream in for yourself. And then it gives you a little extra security. So if you are laid off or something happens, you've got money coming in. You also have the option of ramping it up and turning it into your own business. that replaces your day job. It becomes your sole source of income, and you're not working under anybody's thumb. You're working for yourself. I mean, I encourage people to learn about this and to explore it. It's not for everyone, but it's a real thing. It's never been easier to do that stuff than now. The catch is that it requires a bit of knowledge. You have to understand how business works and things like this. You know what I mean? But it's definitely a possibility for people. There's other things in life. There's other ways of making money besides being an employee. Learn all you can about like all your other options and about how things work, and you will come out on top, Okay. Let's see. Where do we leave off here? Fist says, so yeah, HR makes sense to be there, but I would never do that. Okay. Pop-Tart says, I guess I was asking, is it better to outright express interest in the job or just slowly and incrementally network with the people in that job? Like, wouldn't it be creepy if I just link in connected with all 8 employees on their website? LOL. How can I put this? You know what it feels like, Pop-Tart? It seems like you're starting out, you're learning some of this stuff for the first time. Not to be condescending, but it feels to me like I'm trying to explain how to do a job interview with like an 8-year-old. They don't understand like the basics. They don't understand like, so do I ask them for a job and they give it to me? How does this work? Like you're just starting out. Okay. So you're saying a lot of things that are wrong, but you're learning, you're taking your steps into this world, and it's for your own best interest to do it. A problem that a lot of people have when they first try and get into what the hidden job market is they can't break out of the idea of like thinking that they're like dealing with recruiters. You're not dealing with recruiters. You're dealing with a manager, right? Manager is responsible for running something they have to meet certain goals, right? One of those goals is meeting certain numbers, whether that's sales or money or whatever. They have to meet these targets. And if you can help them do it, they'll be interested in talking to you. If you have something to offer, they'll be interested in partnering with you, right? But you have to understand what these people do. For example, when you go to a job, okay, when you work at a job, I'm assuming, maybe I'm wrong, I'm just assuming that you're either at the worker level or the supervisor level, but you're not at like the executive level, okay? So when you go to work doing whatever it is you do, if you get somebody that contacts you from outside the company, like in an email or something like that, is it your job to handle it and respond to them? I'm guessing no, right? So like if you're at the bottom, that's not part of your job. If you're at the middle, that's usually not part of your job. But if you're at the top, that actually is part of your job. Because you see, how do you think companies partner up? Like if some company wants to be the supplier for another company, or they want to do a strategic partnership or a joint venture, or some kind of business arrangement between the two of them. How do you think they do that? Well, one person reaches out to the other person at the company. Now, they're not going to be talking to somebody at the bottom. They're not going to be talking to somebody in the middle. They're going to be going straight to somebody right at the top, right? Usually an executive. If it's a smaller company, like most companies are small, it'll be either the owner or the CEO, right? Anything like any company less than 100 employees, you're wanting to set up something like a major business arrangement, you're going right to the CEO, So therefore, the executives, it's part of their job to take unsolicited queries from the public and handle them, right? If somebody that you don't know from outside the company wants to contact you and says, hey, I think we should get together and talk about the industry or, this kind of thing. If you say, no, how'd you get this number? Who are you? Go away. Like that. Do you think that's good for business? Of course not. That could be, a major partner that's looking to perhaps partner with you or one of your competitors. You don't know where it's going to go, right? They just want to see kind of what you guys are about, the size of your operation, what your attitude is to working with different other entities, things like this, right? So it's good business for them to say, sure, let's get together. I got like half an hour. Sure, let's talk, this kind of thing, right? And the reality is that people in the world of networking, people are always doing this. They're reaching out to companies that, you might want to work for. You're saying, hey, I got some skills. I'm looking for, this. I might be able to help you with this. If you're looking to get into this, I got some skills, with that. Let me know if that's what you're interested in doing. If yes, let's maybe talk further. If no, no big deal. Just seeing if there's interest. Right? So that's the idea behind a lot of this, right? That's how these things work. So what you're doing is you're learning that world. You're learning like what these people's roles are and their perspective. And then if you understand that, then you can understand the protocol, like for how to reach out to them and what to say. And the bottom line is that if you reach out to them in a very professional way, you make a very reasonable request. You don't ask for the earth and the sky. You don't do like the spam email thing where you talk all about yourself. You're interested in learning about them and having them explain and show you what they do. This kind of thing. A lot of people will give you the time of day, right? That's the idea. So there are many ways to tap the hinge job market. That's a very common way. It's not the only way, but it's certainly a popular way. And the beauty is that you're not dealing with these HR employees that Fist takes such a dislike to. These little grunts deep down in the bowels of the company. You're dealing with the boss. Now, just to put that in perspective, if you are looking for a job, the person you're talking to has the power to hire you on the spot. Okay? That's why you're talking to those people. Okay? They don't have to go through all kinds of series of approvals and requests. They can just hire you just like that if they wanted to. Right? So that's why you go to people that are above your level. They can help you, Anyway, learn all the rules, learn all the principles, do your research. A great thing, a great resource for people that are just sort of getting into this. Let's do ChatGPT. Okay, so if I was approaching a company and, or just say a person, a job seeker was approaching a company and they wanted to use LinkedIn to reach out to the appropriate executive and just do an informational interview, or just send a template message to them just to see if they're interested in, contacting somebody that had certain skills, if those skills were needed. Is that a thing that happens a lot? I don't know what I'm asking here. But the point I'm trying to make is that this is not just something I'm making up. You can go research this stuff. You could start with things like ChatGPT. It gets a few things wrong, but it's a very useful tool. So short answer, yes, it absolutely happens, but not in the way most job seekers imagine. Let's unpack it. First, is it a thing? Yes. Reaching out on LinkedIn to an executive, VP, director, informational conversation is legitimate, blah, 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 blah. So you can do this yourself. You can read it. You can follow up and say, okay, well, how do I do this? How would one go about doing it? I've made a video. I pointed you to a video that shows you how to do precisely that. I built a consulting firm. I got all the clients by doing this. I did informational interviews with CEOs that I didn't know, that they didn't know me. But I contacted these people and I did tons of informational interviews. And a lot of those people ended up being my consulting clients. So I shared, for what it's worth, I shared that method in my course, my Get Hired course. And I also shared a bit of it in that video I pointed you to. For those just joining us, it's called How Successful People Get Jobs. and it's linked in the description box under this live stream. That will show you one effective thing in how to tap the hidden job market, if that's what you're interested in learning how to do. Like, wouldn't it be creepy if I just connected with all 8 employees in their website? Well, I mean, yeah, but then again, I mean, if they have 8 employees on LinkedIn, chances are it doesn't make sense for you to connect to all of them. They're not all executives, I imagine. They're not all running the show, and they're not all in the department where you would want to be, right? So you might want to talk to the boss. You might want to talk to somebody else that's maybe dealing with the department or whatever that you would be interested in. But that's probably going to be it. You know what I mean? And then you move on to other targets. How's that for a long-winded explanation? I think I almost surpassed myself on that one. Anyway, if you're just joining me now, this is a Q&A, anything job search related. We'll probably go for a little bit longer. In the meantime, check out some of my courses. This is the one I think everybody would be interested in here. All my advice all in one place. How to get hired in the posted job market and how to get hired in the hidden job market. All together. And you can follow the link that's in the description box right under this live stream. And I've also made a video about it explaining what the course contains, what you get, how it works, all that kind of stuff. So check that out. Alternatively, I have this. If you want to learn business, business is the scientific study of how to make money for what it's worth. I've got an MBA and I've been a CEO. So check that out if you're interested in either getting promoted in a business or doing business on the side, like entrepreneurship, you know, and working for yourself and making money directly. And then finally, if you want to learn higher level communication skills, check out this course. It's called Write Like a Professional. Yeah, it teaches you how to write, but it's more also about what to say, how to respond, as I slap my microphone around. Check it out. All these courses are linked below in the description box, and they all have accompanying videos that explain the course in much greater detail. So check that out if you are interested in learning any of this stuff. Pop-Tart says, very helpful, thank you. Well, thank you, Pop-Tart. I'm glad it was. I wish you every bit of success. Learn all you can, you know, and learn like a lot on your own, and then go out and try things. Go out and do things. Because there's a time for like learning, and then there's a time for, you know, trying things. Get some hard experience. Nobody can tell you something can't be done if you've just done it. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of the tiebreaker. You get all kinds of conflicting advice, especially on the internet. You know, is this a thing to do? Is it not a thing to do? Well, if you've done it and it worked, it's a thing to do. End of discussion. You know what I'm saying? There's a nice finality about like having done things. Okay, so that could be you, you know, and I encourage you to do it. Learn all you can and then go out and get the proof. Mel says, thank you. This helps a lot. Great. Great. You guys let me know what you're interested in. You know, like I'm just here talking off the top of my head. If you've got specific questions or you're interested in a certain thing, just let me know. Okay, Liv says, how to handle a panel interview. Yeah, the panel interview, it's exactly the same thing as a one-on-one interview. It's going to be the same questions. The only challenge is that it's coming from different people. So there's two big sort of upgrades when you're doing the panel interview. One is, you know, being comfortable, because if you're sitting across the table from 5 people and they're all staring you down, you don't know who any of these people are, and it's intimidating. That's where the rehearsal comes in to play. If you're confident in, you know, and well rehearsed, well prepared, you know your answers, you know what you're here to say, you know, that really helps. So that's not a problem. The second challenge is because there's like multiple people, it really helps knowing who they are so you know how to answer them. Because the CEO of a company asking you a question and a recruiter asking you the same question, you're probably going to want to answer differently, right? You're going to tune it to this person if you kind of know what their background is and maybe why they're asking and what they're interested in, right? For example, a recruiter cares more about, do you have the requirements and do you have any of these risk factors, right? As opposed to a CEO, which will care more about, do you have the right attitude? Are you the type of person that, would want to be upwardly mobile when you work here? You'd want to stay with us long term. You want to climb the ladder and get promoted. We want people like that, right? So different things they're looking for, right? If someone's an accountant and they're asking you something, that helps to know that. If someone's a salesperson and they're asking you something, that really helps to know that. Or if they're, an engineer or, an operations type person, that frames it. So the way you can do that is if you're able to find out who's going to be at the interview before you get there, like say asking the recruiter before the day of the interview, a lot of times they'll tell you, or you can find out who's going to be there, and then you look them up on LinkedIn. And in LinkedIn, you could see, if you've been on LinkedIn, you could see like essentially their resume, their whole history and their education and what job they're in. So you have an idea of who you're talking to. If you can't do that, and it's kind of a surprise, one trick that I've always used for any kind of panel type situation is, get your own business cards made up. Like it's like literally $20 to get a whole stack of business cards. If you have a LinkedIn profile, just take the header of your LinkedIn profile. Just put that on a card. So your profile, like your headshot or whatever, your name, your tagline, and then your contact information. Just put it on a business card. And then the great thing is, if you go to an interview, what I've always done is like I have like a shirt with a chest pocket here, and I have my business cards in there. So if you meet a bunch of people, you take out your card, you give it to that person. Not that you care about that too much, but it's a cue for them to give you their business card. Most people have business cards that work for companies. And if you're meeting 5 people, you don't know who these people are, you could like introduce yourself, you shake their hand, whatever, you give them your card, say, oh, good to meet you. And then you have their cards. And then so you put them on the table, if you're sitting down at the table, like right in front of you. So I got 5 people and I got 5 business cards. So I can remember their names and I can see who they are. You're the accountant, you're the recruiter, you're the CEO, you're the hiring manager, and you're the advisor, third-party advisor, whatever. So this person asked me a question. I look down, like, thank you, John. That was a thoughtful question. And here's my answer. So anyway, some of that stuff can help. Otherwise, just if you're the type of person that can remember people's names, great. I'm not. I'm terrible for remembering names. It's a sign of professionalism to remember people's names and call them by their name. People like hearing their own name. It's a well-known thing. We actually subconsciously respond to it. You think, oh my God, I'm important to you. I'm important to you enough that you remembered my name. I think that's how it works. Right? So if you're the type of person that can remember names, just write them down on a little piece of paper as when at the start of the interview, and then you'll be able to reference their names. If that's important to you. Anyway, in every other respect, the panel interview is the same as a one-on-one interview. Same questions, same things they're looking for. Those are the only differences. Okay, last call for questions. We got 19 people here. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. Hopefully you're enjoying this Friday the 13th. Hopefully you feel lucky. Hopefully you didn't have a job interview today. Actually, Fridays are good for job interviews. If you want to speak to somebody and you don't know anything about that person's patterns, Fridays, just after lunch, is like the perfect time during the entire week to talk to somebody. because the odds are, all things being equal, that they will be in a good mood. It's Friday, so they're like feeling good. They're looking forward to the weekend. Just after lunch, they feel relaxed. They've just had some food probably, so they feel pretty good, right? They're coming back from lunch. They haven't started into a bunch of work yet. So you catch them right before they do. You're probably encountering them when they're at their best mood the entire week. So if you can book a job interview for just after lunch on a Friday, you're the candidate, do so. That's probably a good time to do it. Okay, last call for questions. Before we wind this down, if there's anything else. I am taking next week off live streaming, actually. I've been doing several streams a week for the last 4 or 5 weeks, something like that. So I'll be off for a week and then I'll be back. Got some consulting stuff I got to take care of, so that takes precedence, unfortunately. Okay, so I think we're going to wind this down. I want to thank everybody who participated. You guys are awesome. I wish you the best. If you're between jobs right now and you're finding it stressful as hell, I just want you to know you're not alone and you're not abnormal. This is perfectly normal. It feels like this horrible, horrible thing. Unfortunately, it feels like a permanent thing. It's not. It's temporary. You're going to be fine. Just do the right things. Learn all you can. Practice all you can. Look in the right places. Fish where the fish are. If you're doing a job search campaign, you're looking for posted jobs, that's great. Keep doing it. I would recommend you also look in the hidden job market. If you're looking in the hidden job market, that's great. That's where 80% of the jobs are. Just vary your techniques. There's many different things you can do. So don't just do one thing, do several things. If it helps, I did a video on this channel about 2 months ago, maybe more. It's called How I Would Get a Job. It's 45 minutes long. I cover 11 different methods of getting a job. So if you're only doing one thing, consider adding 1 or 2 other things to give yourself the best chance. Okay, but learn about some of the other methods if you don't know about them. And I wish you the best of luck. Thanks to Randolph, thanks to Mel, Pop-Tart, Fist, everybody. You guys have a great weekend, and I will see you soon. Take care.